Today I have the tremendous honor of introducing Dr. Joyce Mikal-Flynn.
I finished at the side of the pool that was 13 feet deep. Something happened, a cardiac event of some kind. I sunk to the bottom of the pool. The timer looked at my husband, said, "Your wife's not coming up." Over 20 minutes of CPR at poolside. Got life flighted, and that's when I hit UC Davis and on a respirator. And the first time they brought the kids in, I remember looking at them, I knew them. I just didn't know how. It was off the respirator and out of ICU. The cardiologist who was taking care of me, and I walked up to him and I said, "When will I be able to run again?" "Oh, you're never going to run again." I remember saying to him, "Stop telling me what I can't do. I am living. You need to tell me what I can do." 2 years after the event, I happened to run into him and I said, "Oh, hi. Do you remember me?" He goes, "Oh, yeah." He said to me, "You are the bravest woman I've ever met." Like, I get emotional because I think about it. And I didn't really know at that point in time that was actually the seed of the work that was to come. The priority for me going back to get my doctorate was I had this insane, intense interest and curiosity about people who had gone through horrific things in their life and not only survived, but actually thrived, and not in spite of it, but as a direct result. And I was fascinated.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Humanity Unlocked. I am your host, Kimberly Daya, and today I have the tremendous honor of introducing Dr. Joyce Mikal-Flynn. She is an author, and university professor who worked as a family nurse practitioner for over 25 years. With a master's degree in family practice nursing and a doctorate in education, her resume is wildly impressive, but it is even more impressive if you know how her story began. On Sunday, July 20th, 1990, Joyce experienced a sudden cardiac event that occurred after completing a, quote, fun adult swim relay during her daughter's championship meet at Jesuit High School. As a competitor herself, Dr. Joyce took part in the relay, but has no memory of this day. She was later told her heart had stopped in the pool after she completed the relay. She received 22 minutes of CPR and was miraculously resuscitated. By some miracle indeed, an ER doctor, a cardiac nurse specialist, and a pulmonologist happened to be in attendance at that swim meet, and together they saved her life. This single event launched her into the discovery of a concept referred to as post-traumatic growth, or PTG. Most of us are familiar with the term PTSD, which stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. Fewer of us are aware of the concept and principles of PTG. After becoming discouraged with the current rehabilitation models, Dr. Joyce chose to focus her doctoral research on developing and organizing a new model called metahabilitation, a philosophy and system of recovery and rehabilitation promoting post-traumatic growth, PTG. Her ongoing research and writing focuses on recovery, survivorship, and post-traumatic growth, promoting metahabilitation in clinical areas including chronic illnesses, PTSD, athletes post-participation, oncology, addiction, and dependency. Dr. Joyce is the professor of a traumatology course at Cal State University, Sacramento, where 120 students have added themselves to a wait list to attend. And it is within this course that she tells her students they have been sold a lie that says they are somehow incapable because of what has happened to them. Dr. Joyce has flipped the script and teaches that it is because of their trauma that they possess a level of resiliency that offers them a unique edge. Thriving isn't something they have the capacity to do in spite of their trauma. Thriving is actually something they're capable of because of their trauma. Today, we're talking about some of the misconceptions surrounding trauma, why the antidote to despair is action, and the importance of believing another story about ourselves so we can find a way not just out, but up. So excited for this. Welcome to the show, Joyce Mikal-Flynn. Dr. Joyce Mikal-Flynn, and thank you so much for being here. There's a lot of parts of your name, Dr. Joyce Mikal-Flynn. So I had to ask her, which one we're going to call her Dr. Joyce today. That's the easiest way.
That's the easiest way. That's good. Just to confirm too, so right now I have 120 students signed up with a wait list, not 120 students waiting to get in. So
with a wait list. Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
When we met for the
Yeah,
pre-interview,
yeah.
and I'm like scribbling notes.
Yes.
It's funny because I was trying to keep up, and I went back, and I'm like, what was I writing there?
Yeah. Right now we have my course, which is really, we can get into that later. But it's very exciting that, and I really appreciate, especially Dr. Greg Shaw, who helped organize and helped open some doors for me to get this course up and running. And so now we have 2 sections with 60 students in each section, and waiting. And I get emails from students. Can I get on your wait list? So,
I mean, I
it's
think
fun.
I know a lot of adults who aren't even students who'd want to take that course. It's highly in need.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to give our audience, you guys listening, a wider backstory. So I would love to begin by going back to that day 34 years ago, which it was just 34 years this month, right?
Yeah, July 20th.
Yeah. You were 35, married with 3 young children. You were a marathon runner and a triathlete. You were working as a charge nurse inside a medical intensive care unit.
No, that was before. So at that time that's okay. That time, my background, I had a background prior to being a nurse practitioner. I was a charge nurse in a medical intensive care, which gave me a lot of pause when I heard about the kind of resuscitation they did.
Yes.
But no, so at that point in time, you're exactly right. I was very physically active, but at that point in time, I was working as a family nurse practitioner.
Family nurse practitioner. Okay. All right. So by all measures, and as I told you, I watched a lot of what's already online, some of the interviews you've done. You seem to be the perfect picture of health and success, both personally and professionally. And then this happens. What can you tell us about you, what you've been told about that day and the days that followed?
Thanks for saying that, what I've been told, because when we shared before, and I tell this all the time, I literally have zero memory for about almost a month of my life. So this event happened on a Sunday. I kind of remember going out to dinner with some friends on Friday night, and then this championship swim meet was on a Friday afternoon, evening, Saturday, Sunday. And so the event happened on Sunday. And so people told me that before they had the final swim for the championship meet on Sunday, they made an announcement, we're going to have a fun adult relay. Well, I'd been doing a lot of training in terms of triathloning, so I'd been swimming a lot. And things aren't fun to me. Things are challenging to me. So I grabbed my husband and a couple of other friends, and I said, come on, we're going to swim this, and we're going to win this. And I'm going to swim the last leg of the event, the relay, because I'm the fastest. And so off we went. And that is precisely what happened, that I did swim the last leg of the event. I finished at the side of the pool that was 13 feet deep. I was told that I did finish. The timer said, do you need help out? I said, no. Something happened, a cardiac event of some kind. Something happened. I sunk to the bottom of the pool. The timer looked at my husband, said, your wife's not coming up. He dove to the bottom of the pool, got me to the side, and just precisely as you said, luckily there's a lot of kids there, so there were a lot of parents there, and one was an ER doc, a cardiac nurse specialist, a pulmonologist, an orthopedist, blah, blah, blah. And so I had over 20 minutes of CPR at poolside. The event happened at Jesuit High School, where the championship was. They landed a helicopter in the football field at Jesuit, got me life-flighted to UC Davis. I was told by the doc, Bruce Gordon, who's an ER doc for Sutter, actually, and he was on the helicopter with me, that my heart stopped again in the helicopter, and they got it going. And that's when I hit UC Davis and on a respirator.
Did you know, because I know Bruce comes up again in your story, did you know him prior to that?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did know him because we lived in the same area, same community. And I'm a nurse practitioner. I was with Sutter, and Bruce was with Sutter, and our kids were the same age. And so Dr. Gary Ryle is another one. We knew all his kids. They all went to school together. So Gary Ryle.
So they
I'm
came
trying
to rescue you, and
yeah,
they were like, "Wait a minute, we know this one."
Stuart Guarini is a physician. He's
Yeah.
an ENT specialist, and we just all knew each other. And so I will say, I will never forget this. After this is all was done, and it was like a month or two after I was out of the hospital, a couple of things that were so fundamentally just, I just praise God for the people that told me certain things. So I remember going up to Gary Ryle, and we were at some function, and I said, "Hey, Gary, I'm just curious. How long did the CPR? How long did you guys go?" And he just so stoically looked at me, and I think he said like 22 minutes, and I just couldn't even talk. I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah," and I said, "Gary, 22 minutes? Did you guys think about like stopping?" He goes, "Joyce, your husband's there, your kids are there. Everybody's no. We were not going to stop the resuscitation. You got your heart going again." And then I remember seeing Bruce and at another function, and I said something. He asked me, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Bruce, I'm actually," so this was like a month or so after. I said, "I'm actually doing pretty well physically. I'm really tired all the time, but I'm like physically." But I just remember saying, I go, "Bruce, but I think I have some brain damage." Right. And Bruce kind of chuckled, and he looked at me and goes, "Joyce, you're an athlete. When you have an athletic injury, you have to rehab it. You're going to have to rehab your brain." And as soon as he said that, I was like, oh my gosh. So, I did the things that they had kind of set up before, where they had set up speech therapy and things like that. And I just that just kind of drove me to do things. But yeah, Stuart, I've seen Stuart multiple. I've spoken at some of awards that he's been given. I mean, yeah, these are people I knew and knew our kids. So
that's crazy. And then I did hear about you talking to them about the 22 minutes of CPR. And as a layperson, like somebody who's not involved in the medical community, you kind of don't really stop and think about it. But as someone who's, I'm sure, practiced CPR yourself, you know how exhausting and how long and how that could be.
It is exhausting. And the other thing I think I shared with you before, too, is you really start to look at the data of people who have an out-of-hospital cardiac event like that, who actually survive to the hospital. And then you get data of those people who survived to get into the hospital, survived, and are, out of the hospital, are discharged. I just remember when I was doing my master's work and I was looking at some literature around that, I literally was in the library and I just had to stop because I was so, oh my gosh, I cannot believe the percentage is so low and how incredibly fortunate
Very.
I am.
Yes. And now we know why. I feel like this is, all leading to something. So you were on an ICU respirator. They told you you were diagnosed with having an AV nodal reentry problem. I guess something that's just a heart issue.
It's an electrical, that was
You initially there was, for those listening, like you kind of went through a whole issue with you recognized your family, you knew them, you didn't know how you knew them, issues with memory and aphasia, I guess it's called. How long did that last for?
That lasted, I would have to say it was a good, it's hard to remember all the particulars, but it was like several weeks. It was a good long time where I really recognized, like I tell people, it's so funny because this happened 34 years ago and nobody really ever mentioned TBI to me. I do a lot of work with people with TBI now, but that was never really mentioned to me. I just knew I wasn't right. And I remember telling people that I just felt like I was kind of walking around like for people who drink wine, like maybe you had like 2 glasses of Chardonnay, like you're not really sharp, but you can function, but you're not really with it. And I just remember feeling like that where I just wasn't with it. And so, you're right. I mean, when I shared with you that I don't remember this, but my husband tells me when they're taking me off the respirator and brought him into the ICU, one of the doctors said, Dr. Alan Siefkin, he was in the ICU at UC Davis, and he said, lean over, and so he said to me, Joyce, who's this? And I don't remember this, but I have a brother that's almost the same age as my husband, and they're both tall and they have dark hair, and I called him my brother. I said, Jude. And they're going, wow. And then the first time they brought the kids in, I do remember this. I remember looking at them because our son wasn't quite 2. Our daughters were 8 and 9, and I knew them. I knew somehow. I knew that I just didn't know how.
God, that's got to be scary. Oh, wow. Okay, so, and just as an aside, about 2 to 3 weeks later, you asked your doctor if you when could you run again? How did that conversation go?
So I was out of ICU. I was off the respirator and out of ICU. So I went from UC Davis, and then I went to Sutter Memorial. And the doctor, who's the cardiologist who was taking care of me, I guess it was in the evening, and I walked up to him and I said, hello, Dr. So-and-so. I just wanted, check, when will I run? When will I be able to run again? Oh, you're never going to run again. And I said, well, when will I be able to start swimming? Oh, you'll never swim again. Well, when will I be able? And I finally just looked at this doctor and I said, you don't know who you're talking to. I've been through a bunch of things in my life. I've overcome a lot of things. I'm going to overcome this, and you just wait and see, blah, blah, blah. And I turned around and I walked to go back to my room, and I couldn't find my room. And he looked at the nurse and said, she's, getting all upset with me. She didn't even know where her room was. But, funny, about 2 years later, 2 years after the event, I happened to run into him, this physician, and I said, oh, hi, do you remember me? He goes, oh, yeah, I remember you. And he said, I heard you're doing well, and I kind of talked about what I was doing, and he said to me, you are the bravest woman I've ever met.
Wow.
So that was, it was just a lot of, I get emotional because I think about it. Because you do remember, being told, and then I remember saying to him also, stop telling me what I can't do. I am living. I am well aware of what I can't do. You need to tell me what I can do. You need to ask me what I want to do. And your job, our job, is to get me there. And I didn't really know at that point in time when I was talking to him, that was actually the seed of the work that was to come.
Yes.
That was to come. So.
Yeah. Yes. We're going to get to that. But yes, I see what you mean. Okay. So over the next 2 years that followed, you experienced, I think even we're going to talk about this with your program, but you experience obviously anxiety, depression, totally normal with any of us going through these kinds of things.
Yes.
Everything that used to come easily, you said in one of your interviews, was suddenly difficult. You talk about having to undergo speech therapy, cardiac rehabilitation, and then being, quote, you told me really keen on getting your brain back. At one point, you spoke to a colleague. Oh no, you already told me about this, about what Bruce said about the brain damage. Yeah. And 2 years after, you said that you remember a moment when you realized your cognition felt like it had improved, and then you decided to go back to school to get your master's. So what prompted that, to go back to school?
Well, I love education. I'm one of those weirdos that loves going to the library. I love being in the library. I love learning. I'm, lifelong learner. I've always loved school. And so when I was going, like you talked about, I did, because of the aphasia, I did go back and see a speech therapist, and they really helped not only with that language skill, but also with my cognition. And going back to cardiac rehab was, luckily, my husband found a cardiologist, Dr. Dan Van Hammersfield, shout out to him, who's also a runner, and he got me back into running. And so when, again, I just started working the problem. I mean, I didn't realize it at the time, but when I look back, that's what I did. I started figuring out what I could do, and I started getting some traction, and I started seeing things getting a little bit better. I will say this, that there is a point in time, and I see this with myself, and I saw this with myself, and I see this with lots of people. Number one, where the person makes a critical decision to move forward, because I'm going to talk about that in a second, but also, from a spiritual point of view too, I'm Catholic, and I was a weekly mass goer and everything. And of course I was super mad at God. I wasn't going to talk to God, because this wasn't supposed to happen to me. And this wasn't going to, this wasn't. And I remember to this day, like 6 months, 6 months after my event, I just remember coming to, because going to bed at night times were tough because it's quiet, and I kept thinking about what happened and ruminating over it. And I remember just coming down to my knees, and I just begged God. I begged him, take this anxiety, take this depression, take this away from me. I can't live with this anger. Went to bed, slept well, never really happened. So as time was going on, so I just started again taking some control and making choices and putting good people around me who actually helped motivate and push me. And I did go back to start seeing patients. My colleague and friend, Dr. Dan Fields, we were in co-practice together. He's a family. He brought me back in and, just saw every patient with me and just worked with me for months and getting that all back. And then I remember one night after, this is probably about a year and a half after I was finished seeing patients, and I was driving home, and I got to tell you, things got better, no question about it, but it was hard. It just, everything was so hard. And I'm driving home, and I just thought, I don't think I can do this anymore. It's too hard. And I thought, if I just drive into this embankment, it'll just be over, and I just don't have to. And then all of a sudden, this little thing came in my head. Oh my gosh, so many people worked to get you back. So many people prayed to get you back. So many people did all this stuff. And then it's just like, at that moment, I just thought, I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to move forward.
Yeah.
And one of the moving forward things, because I love school, I thought, well, get my brain back. Maybe I'll go back to school. So I went back. I lived by Sac State. I already had a bachelor's in nursing. I already had my NP. I wanted to get a master's. And so I thought, yeah, well, that's what I'll do. I'll go back to school, and I'll push myself cognitively and academically, and the best thing I did.
And use your brain, basically.
And use my brain.
Yeah. Best thing you did, yeah. Okay, so you mentioned in the pre-interview, after the accident, you remembered a time when you were back working as a nurse part-time, and were also teaching part-time at UC Davis. And you talked about being so busy and so overwhelmed. And I think that's the night you were talking about when you kind of heard a voice that said you weren't resuscitated so you could work more.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that about?
So when I went back to school and I earned my master's degree, I thought, oh, this is great. I'll see patients part-time. And there's an opportunity. I got my nurse practitioner training and certification at UC Davis through their med school at UC Davis. So there was an opening to teach. I thought, oh, that's great. I'll work part-time seeing patients. I'll work part-time as a faculty member, and that'll be great. And I can hire people to watch my kids, and but I'll be there for, I'll be home when they're home, blah, blah, blah. Well, I did that for probably 2 years. And one day, I'll never forget walking into my house, and I looked at my children, and I was tired, and I'm sure they were tired, and I'm trying to figure and all of a sudden, I just had this little voice in my head said, you weren't resuscitated to work more. And I stopped, and I just went, I have to prioritize things. And so my husband and I sat down and figured out how I could work, again, part-time and be there. And then he'd work super full-time. And, we worked the problem. And I'll never look back and regret that. I will never look back and regret that because, when you go through something like that, it's like you try and, gain back your life. And what I was looking at, I did gain back all my life in terms of my career and seeing patients and, again, going to the next level and teaching at UC Davis and all that. But I had to see, the bigger picture. And recognizing, too, that time was passing and our children were going to be at home for forever. Yeah. And I didn't want to miss that time. And I just look back at that and I treasure that so much because, I did go back when our daughters were in college and our son was finishing up high school. I did go back to get my doctorate. And that was such a good time because I didn't feel like they were launched. Yeah. 2 of them were launched, and our son was getting, and it just was.
You weren't compromising anything at that point.
Totally.
You had done that, yeah.
And I could focus, and it was a really good time to focus. And when I talk about this, I basically, when I went back to get my doctorate, I was 48 years old.
That's amazing.
I finished when I was 53. And a lot of times, people would talk about...
That's kind of like Catherine. Sorry to cut you, but it's similar. Mm-hmm.
And because I don't think, in my mind, we have this concept that, get it done now, get it done now, get it done now, get it done now. And we don't realize that life's a process. And there's a lot of things that open up for us if we kind of sit back, do what we want to do, and see what's out there. And so when I went back to get my doctorate, I just was in such a good place. Personally, my husband and I, and personally, where our children were at, and I could just really focus. And I tell people that really, I think I really enjoyed it more because there wasn't, as you said, I didn't feel like I was overburdening other people and myself with that. And some of the most productive, intellectual, spiritual, academic aspects of my life happened, 50 years on when I got to get into that and really enjoy that.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Because you're right. I think that we're on this timeline that we need to get it all done before we, before whatever it is. But yet the wisdom you gain in the process of sort of taking your time and letting things unfold naturally is something that you can't rush. It comes with time, and it comes with struggle and then overcoming struggle. And you're such a living testament, and it just reinforces some of the things that I'm starting to learn in my own life. So this is really good.
Well, it was funny. Some of my friends, though, I had some kind of surprising. Some female friends of mine kept saying, "Well, why are you doing that? 48. Why are you doing that?" And I said, because I really, the priority for me going back to get my doctorate was I had this insane, intense interest and curiosity about people who had gone through horrific things in their life. And again, as you said in the beginning, not only survived, but actually thrived, and not in spite of it, but as a direct result. And I was fascinated by that aspect. I saw patients do that. I saw family members. I'd read books, see movies, and I just wanted to study that. And I thought I need to study that formally, which really drove me back into doing that research. And it just is.
And the research supported that theory that you had going in?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Wow. Okay. So, but what's interesting is when we were talking, so when I first met you, I just have to say, I asked you, like, did you know that this was the beginning, like you were going to use this to go do, sort of harness it? And you said no. It was this was all just sort of a natural unfolding of sort of how it went. There was no big plan or big motivation to that's what it was. It just became that over time. It became a gift, but it's not necessarily something that you saw from the jump.
No.
That it was something you could use to your advantage in order to help others.
And, so we're, talking about that, and, you obviously talk about PTG, which I just want to, go on record as saying doctors Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun are the ones who coined the term post-traumatic growth.
Right.
And so they have identified through a variety, all their wonderful research, the 5 domains of post-traumatic growth. What I came to understand, first I understood the concept or the behavior that people survive and thrive. And I saw that's just there. I'd never studied that. I never went in to try to study that because it's like you see it all the time. You see it all around you. What I became intrigued with was not only the question of why, so the motivation around that, but I was very, very fortunate when I was doing my doctoral work that my dissertation chair, so I'd gone this is a long story, but my wonderful dissertation chair, Dr. Dean Elias, when I was constructing my research question, we talked a lot about it. I said, I want to know why people do that. And I'll come into using some other words later, but why they do that. And he said, well, yeah, you do want to know why, but what I think you really want to understand is the how.
Yes.
The how of how they do that, so you can implement it. And, this is obviously, I did my doctoral work. I finished in, 2005, 2007, around then when I finished my dissertation. But I really came to see the brilliance of that, because the why, the motivation of doing certain activities changes over time, but the how doesn't. So the why, as an example, we'll just say, like, I stopped smoking cigarettes, when I had kids, obviously when I was pregnant. So the why of me doing that and the why I don't smoke cigarettes now is different. But the how I did it, the how I stay with that discipline of not doing that behavior has not changed. If you're looking at, like, weight loss as an example, the why of maybe you lose weight can change over time. But a lot of times, like, I love Weight Watchers, and so, using the how, the mechanism, I have been ingrained with, and I like it, and it works, and I use it. So that's the beauty of looking at, as we talk about, post-traumatic growth, the system that I devised that started out with a word, then a concept and like a philosophy that then became a clinical pathway or mechanism. So I'll just jump into meta, sitting around with some friends. This is probably 25, 30 years ago. And I just did not like the word rehab. I just thought it was so small. It did not signify at all. that people blow past rehab is baseline. People blow past that all the time.
Yeah.
They may not look the same. They may not act the same. Their bodies may not be the same, but the way they act in the world is way advanced. So we're sitting around and somebody just all of a sudden said, "Hey, what about meta?" And I went, "Oh, you look it up. What does it mean?" Going above, surpassing. I went, "Oh, yeah." And then I looked at habilitation. I looked it up, and it's restoration. I went, "Oh, my gosh. People metahabilitate or metahab all the time." And I wanted to look at critical, challenging situations and even trauma from the perspective of that's an outcome. So when people use this system, of which there are 6 stages you can go through, when people use this system, ultimately and over time, they can experience post-traumatic growth and understand the 5 domains that Tedeschi and Calhoun put out there.
Right. So people were already doing this. They just didn't know that there was these patterns involved, and you were able to identify it and build this program around that.
That's a beautiful way to do it. I love how you say that because I don't think I know now. I've become way aware that when you start to talk about this, and I can go over those 6 stages pretty quickly. When you start to talk about this, people, it's their lack of awareness that they, in fact, have done it. Because I tell people all the time, this is like when you talked about, and I don't think it's too big of a word to use. I do tell my students full out, you are being lied to about what situations do to you. People are focusing on what's wrong. And I am not foolish. I am not a Pollyanna. Things are bad and things can get bad, but you are not the only people in the history of the world who have gone through this. It is bad, but my question to you is 2 things we talk about: choice and control. What are you going to do about this, and what choices are you going to make, and how are you going to take control? Because we have within us absolutely superb systems, mechanisms that not only allow us to survive, because if we didn't, we wouldn't get, once you're born, you wouldn't live 48 hours. So we have those mechanisms, but on top of that, those mechanisms are keyed into thriving, to growing, but they will not do that unless they are pushed on. So if you're looking at whether it's the neurobiology system or the cardiovascular system or the respiratory system or the musculoskeletal system and all those systems, you look, the way to strengthen those systems is to stress them.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. I hate that that's true, by the way. Yeah. And I've said this to my kids too. And because when they are going through hard things and want to, they're much older now, 22 and 16. My daughter's the 16-year-old. And I just said, unfortunately, the only way you're going to get better is just to keep doing it. Like, only way out is through. And I always say, I hate that that's the truth, but it is. Yep. And avoiding it just makes it, or sitting in that. Because let's talk about, like, there are people that choose not to. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting when you say, sometimes you sit in that. And one of the things I like to tell people that I work with, because I have, studied this now from the situation of the individual survivor as well as vicarious and secondary trauma survivors, and communities. And you do see, you mentioned the word patterns before. You definitely see patterns of people who have struggled and gained some traction, made some choices, and moved on. And this does not happen overnight. This happens over time. And there are several things that come into play, several variables that can help people do that. But I will say to people, even with my children, I remember doing this. Okay, I'm going to give you a good day just to lose it. You got to just lose it. Sometimes if it's more traumatic, you give you a little bit more time. I used to, I work with veterans. I used to say this with them all the time. I'm going to give you time to just lose it. But here's the thing. I'm going to come back and get you because I can't let you stay there. Because I need to work with you. I don't like help. I need to work with you to move in whatever direction you want to go, because we need to do that to not only get out, as you said, the antidote to despair is action. We get into some action. What you decide is your action. I'm not telling you what to do, but we'll decide that together and move on. And again, it is flipping that notion of focus on what you can do. Well, I can't do this. Okay, I don't want to go there. I really do not want to go there. It's despairing. It's difficult for me. I want you to tell me what you can do. What can you do? Can you get up in the morning?
Yeah.
Can you take a shower? Can you make your bed? Let's start with the simple stuff. And it is amazing over time when people start gathering some of those successes. They build on one another. When people don't do that, I really talk to them. Well, first of all, I'm just going to throw out there, I do like counseling. I got counseling. I think counseling's a really good thing.
I feel like I know where this is going.
Yeah, a good thing to get, but you got to pick a good counselor, because you got to pick a counselor who's going to work with you on, understanding what happened and then how you're going to move forward. But there are times when people need more intense therapy. And so because they're not moving, or there's just so many obstacles or things that are happening. So I'm not a therapist. I don't claim to be a therapist. I'm a behavioral scientist, and I focus on the structure of moving forward after tough stuff happens. And in that, I do understand that sometimes people need this extra bit. There are, in all honesty, too, I remember when I was doing my doctoral work, I read the book Survivorship by Bruno Bettelheim, and he worked with people who had gone through the prison camps and things. And, there just are some times where things are so overwhelming to people. It's just, they just need some extra special help with that. Yeah. So that's what I do. So I never look at the fact that people can't. I like to look at it and say, okay, let's focus on what is it you want, and how can you get there, and what special things do we need to put around you, and have them have that awareness. So
I want to say, it's a little foggy in my memory, but I want to say there's been some recent literature, some research done to suggest that basically it's not the argument that is like not in favor of therapy, but it says that there's some research to suggest that ruminating on your problems weekly in therapy and not putting action behind it. Like, I have a therapist who I have on the show once a month, Katera, and she's has been the therapist to a couple family members of mine. She won't be my therapist because we're friends, so I guess it's against ethics. But anyway, she's amazing, and she really firmly believes in action. And if you're not going to take action, she really can't work with you. But what this research is suggesting is that ruminating on your problems actually, like, that begets more problems. Like, it's sort of complaining begets more complaining, success begets success. It's that whole notion of whatever you're focusing on grows. And so what you're saying is take a day, take a defined period of time where you let yourself fall apart, and then it's time to pick yourself back up and move. And I wonder, this kind of goes into my next question. Like, as a population, what is the thing that you think we're getting wrong when we're addressing or dealing with trauma? Do you think part of it is because people don't know when to pick up and take action?
I think it's a lot of the language that we use. So, for example, when I even teach my students, I've become very persnickety, very careful about words. So, as an example, when a student comes to me and says something, oh, I made a mistake, I said, oh, no. You created an opportunity to get better. So we look at even the word, challenges, something's, wrong. No, it's a challenge. And I will say, as we are right in the middle of the Olympics, how many stories of those people in those Olympics, I don't care what country they're from or whatever, you look at their backstories, that was never a full-on direct way to get where they're at. They always had those. Another thing, like I was just challenging some people. I do an annual Posttraumatic Growth conference at Sac State, and we've been very successful. We did one in 2023 about the science and practice of post-traumatic growth. In 2024, our focus was doing a spotlight on mental wellness. They go, let's do spotlight on mental illness. I go, no, that just throws me off, because we want to focus on what is well. And again, I understand there is that issue. People go through horrific, sometimes horrific things. But again, we have these systems in place. When we address it specifically, we can engage those systems very meaningfully so that we can grow. And so, the thing I think I mentioned to you before too is when we were talking about that, my colleagues and I at Sac State, I said, because they say, well, we have a mental health, what's it that we have a mental crisis. And I go, what if you changed that and said we have a mental health opportunity? That's still understanding what's going on there. But these situations, again, provide profound opportunities to transform, profound opportunities, vehicles to grow and develop. And this is not easy, and I don't encourage you to do it alone, because one of the big things I learned in my own personal journey, and I learned this through my research, is I was always like, well, I get this. I can do this. I don't need any help. I got this. All right. And this situation with this resuscitation and everything was so huge. I really understood if I was ever going to get out of this, I was not going to be able to do it alone. Yeah. So I was going to have to allow people in, and I was going to have to ask for and accept help. And that was a game changer. Yeah. But ask for and accept the right help.
Yeah.
And so, I had people that, pushed me like I will just tell you this one cute story. So a colleague and one of my best friends, Dr. Bridget Parsh, she's a colleague at Sac State. And so she wasn't there at the time, but she knew all about this. And we'd been working together. We actually shared an office for a while. And I finished my doctorate, and she said, you really need to write a book about that. And I said, yeah, I will. And she goes, no, you really need to write a book about that. So I get so anxious around sometimes like writing, and I don't know if it's that good. I don't know if I'm that smart. I don't know, And so she kept literally every month, how's that book coming? And so I was, it's going to. So finally one day she literally sat down with me and she said, Joyce, you found out some information people need to know. People need to know this. So this is not about you.
Not
Don't make
about
this
you.
about you.
Right.
This is about them.
Right.
And I said, well, I just don't know, Bridget, if I'm that smart, if I can write that well, I don't think. And she said, well, first of all, you are that smart. Second of all, you can write. And third of all, you're really annoying. You're really annoying. You need to write this book, and I will help you just get that book written. And that was my first book called Turning Tragedy into Triumph, Metahabilitation, a Contemporary Model of Rehab. And that was her just like, you need people to tell you the truth.
Yes. Oh my God. All right. Did you have a hard time with did it take you a while to find the confidence to know that you were deserving of a platform to talk about this, or what was it?
Oh, that's such a great question. I never really thought about it that way, but yes, of course, I was like, I didn't really think. First of all, I will have to say, I just didn't want to use my experience as a platform to talk about this.
Yeah.
As a scientist, I really wanted to say, well, yeah, I had this experience and it's motivational, but that's not enough. I really wanted to unpeel that onion. I really wanted to break it down and go, what is this all about? Which drove me to get my master's, which drove me to get my doctorate. And in this 20 years afterwards, it's really driven me to the point where I remember saying to somebody, another good friend of mine, Dr. Cecilia Hernandez, said, what do you want to do? I go, I want to be an expert in this field. And to do that, I realized I had to do a lot of work behind that. So it really hasn't been until the last few years where I have felt very comfortable because of the work that I've done. I've published a lot, I've written some books, I've done quite a bit of speaking, and I created this course at Sac State. There's just a lot of things that I have seen evolve that I went, yeah, I got that right. Yeah, I got that right. Yeah. The other thing, too, was I understood the concept of metahab, and I really, with these stages, and I'll go over those as soon as I finish this, with those stages, I understood that. But the thing also that just enamored me about this, I was able to teach a very rudimentary course in neuroscience at Sac State. Not an original researcher. I don't do original research on the brain. I use other people's research and teach this course. And I was fascinated by what our brain does when we challenge it, when we stress it, when it's been damaged and we go back into it. And some of the things, thank you for the speech therapists, the communication specialists, and all those physical therapists, and all of you people who help with that, because we know the brain is plastic, so it can mold and fix itself. We also know Dr. David Eagleman's work on live wired. The brain is live wired, and so it can detach some connections and reconnect or build new connectors, wires, neural networking in that. And so I went, oh, that makes sense. And then a colleague of mine talked about, Dr. Michelle Deng talked about genetics and helped me understand the concept of epigenetics. And I went, okay.
Yes.
This is insane, where you can tell me. So Dr. Deng and then Dr. John McPherson, he's part of my program, talks about epigenetics. He's a genetics professor at UC Davis. And the notion that we have a genetic sequence at conception. Right now, that doesn't change. There's a lot of people out there splicing and dicing and all that, but basically human doesn't change. But what we do know is that genes have a mechanism to turn them on or turn them off, to be expressed or not expressed. And there's 4 basic ways that they do that, which I'm not going to get into, but they can be turned. And we have some say in that. And I went, oh my gosh. Yeah. And that's why I came into this bold notion of people choice, control,
Yeah.
direction, choice, control. So when you push that out to them, that to me made it so clear. It's like, how can you not
Right.
look at it this way? It's malpractice almost not to challenge people with this ideology. So
I think so. It's interesting because I feel like with my own experience, because I can speak on being where I'm at now, which is a much better place, and then where I was then, which I've kind of told you about, where I really identified with my illness. And I think for me, I think for a lot of people I know, just even peripherally, I think that when you have fought something for whatever it is, some kind of trauma for a long time, and you're fighting, and then you get either a diagnosis or whatever. Basically, you get permission to rest when you've been in fight mode for so long. It is real. You either are afraid to leave the rest, that you're going to have to go back into fight mode and you don't have the fight left, or you lose your will to. It's like I felt like my will just kind of melted away, because I would, in the beginning, because I was so type A, it was up, down, fight, crash, fight, crash, fight, crash. And then I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm not fighting anymore. I'm done. And then I just sunk in. But I think there's also another thing that happens, like where we talked about with the whole catastrophizing and like people getting lost in the drama of it all with the world we live in. Mine happened like nearly 20 years ago, 18 years ago at the start of it. So the world was not quite what it is now. Now it's, I'm sorry to say, and I mean, moms of teenagers know it's almost cool to have like a mental, from what I'm hearing. I mean, my daughter, we've had long conversations about this. If you don't have mental illness, then you're not, you're somehow not emotionally, I couldn't even put words to it. Do you know what I'm talking about, though?
I know exactly what you're talking about. And, one of the things, that's why I love teaching. So I love teaching college students, because I am here to tell you, they don't really want to be that way.
Okay,
They
talk
really,
about this.
They really don't, because like I teach a lot of students. I have at least, like in the last few 60 students at least a semester, and now this semester I'm having more, and I am always so pleasantly surprised when they come into my course kind of with maybe some of the mindset that you have, but when I say to them, I'm going to challenge you on this, I'm going to flip the script. You all have been through something. I am not minimizing or diminishing what you have been through. What I'm going to challenge you on, what do you want to do with that? And I start moving in the direction that I go, and we talk about, like I said, the neurobiology, the genetics of it. We go through all this, and I cannot tell you the response I get from students. Like, nobody's ever talked to me like this before. Nobody's ever said this to me before. I never thought about this before. And I've had students give me feedback that, like, every student at Sac State needs to take Dr. JMF's class. I mean, they're really, because they are, I'm telling you, hungry for a message of hope. Hungry for the message of self-efficacy. Like, one of the things I just actually at the end of when I wrote my second book that came on this subject, that came out in 2021, called Anatomy of a Survivor: Building Resilience, Grit, and Growth After Trauma, I finish each chapter with, you got this. And that came to me when I would meet with students for my office hours. And before, they'd be upset about a paper that they didn't get the grade they thought, or whatever. Things were going on with their course or whatever, school. So before we'd get into that, I'd say to them, before we talk about that, I've got time. I want you to give me 10 minutes. Tell me your story. Tell me your story. And I would hear these insane, crazy stories of things that they'd been through, or family members, or first generation college student, or all these kinds of stuff. And I would just sit there in awe. And when they'd finish, I'd look at them, I go, and you're worried you can't get through this class? You got this. Do you not understand how strong you are? Do you not understand how, and you throw that back on them, because we're not giving them the message that, this isn't the first time you've been through a challenge.
Yeah.
You've been through challenges before. What did you do then? So that's why, again, I never tell people what to do. I challenge them to look at a family member, themselves, a movie, whatever, and start identifying, what'd you do? How'd you do that? Well, let's go back there. And I'm telling you, at the end of the semester with those students, I'm telling you, the students at Sac State, you give me any demographic you want. I've had them in my class, and they have said over and over again, I just have never identified in this way. And that's why I get so mad at kind of society as a whole, because we are, looking at this, and like I tell them too, I go, you guys do realize you're not the first generation to ever go through a COVID situation or that kind of situation. We've been through this before, and the beauty of this is we have been through this before. Some of you, there is no question, suffered tremendously, loss of family members and all that. And again, I'm not diminishing or minimizing that. This is all horrific. But how do you think those people want you to live now?
Right.
How are you going to honor them? How are you going to do that? How are you going to come through that? And so it's just like, again, changing a mindset, changing some language. But more than anything, I want them to go into them. You got this, people. I want you to look at that. It's so powerful, beautiful.
It's beautiful, and I feel like it is in such the contrast the message that a lot of the kids that I am aware of, between my son who's finished high school in 2020 and my daughter who's a junior this year, it's so disempowering to really sit in that in that state where you are almost celebrated for being, I don't want to say being a victim, because that's not what I mean. It's more, you're celebrated for
focusing on what's wrong.
Yeah, like I almost can't put words to it, because it's very hard. It's new, for one.
Oh yeah, you definitely see it. No, there's no question. You see it kind of run through, and people, there's no question. People have challenged me on things, and I've had to rethink some things about how I do this approach, and that's why I'm always very, very, very careful about, again, I am not diminishing what has happened here. There's no question. That scar's there. That scar's there.
Yeah.
What I'm telling you is that you are alive, and with the knowledge of how you move past that scar, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah,
So,
I wrote down something that said, I put, in one of your interviews online, you talk about how you, quote, "You never don't pay attention to what happened to a person. I honor that," you say. And you go on to put into perspective that being depressed, sad, and scared, it's all part of the process, and you encourage the survivors to engage with that process. And you said, quote, "You are not crazy. You have been through something." And in short, you basically go on to say, but that doesn't necessarily equate to a psychiatric disorder.
Right.
So do you think it's pathologizing behavior around trauma has become a problem, and it is inhibiting our ability to heal and become stronger in that process?
Yeah.
I think it's like, when you were talking about not automatically a psychiatric disorder, that was I sat with that for a minute, because I think when you go through trauma, you're automatically given a diagnosis of Am I being too? I don't know if I'm being
Yeah,
too.
I think what people. Well, first of all, even though I am a nurse practitioner, I don't like categorizing people.
Right.
It's just really that's a really tough thing. I think what we look at is these are not, like I said, psychiatric problems. They are life problems. And you're going to go through them more than once. If you're living, you're not going to get away from this. You're not going to get out of this life without having gone through something. You do that. And so, again, there are definite psychiatric diagnoses that we need to pay attention to, and special people pay attention to those and get help with that. For the very majority of us, when we go through different things, again, like I say, you're not crazy. Of course, you're going to be depressed. I expect you to be. I used to use the word normal. I think it's normal to go through depression, and I stopped using that. I use the word expected. I expect you to be depressed. I expect you to be angry. I expect you to have anxiety. And by the way, anxiety are not necessarily diagnoses, they're symptoms, right?
Yeah,
and so
that's a good point.
you go through that, and I say, when you have those, your awareness of those to me is a call to action.
Yeah.
You're going through that, and it's a call to action. And those aspects of the healing process must be addressed, and they can be addressed, and then you continue in that process to overtime. And it doesn't mean you don't go back and forth sometimes and things like that. But once you acknowledge, once you become aware, once you purposefully engage with the situation and understand over time, again, what this did for you, it's really hard not to go through stuff and not over time say, okay, how am I going to take control? What choices am I going to make? And what am I going to do? So that's why I love the system of Metahab. And so I'm just going to go through real quick the stages. So one of the things that I identified during my doctoral research was I interviewed multiple people who had been through horrendous things, really tough things, from breast cancer at age 30 with a woman with 3 children, spinal cord injury of a young man playing rugby at Berkeley. I interviewed a survivor of a Nazi concentration camp. I mean, some big stuff. Wow. And so I not only talked to them about what happened to them and in the aftermath, and I just had very open-ended questions, but I also went into their background. How were they raised? Who raised them? What did they go through? Blah, blah, blah. And one of the things after looking at that, I could really see, I love that word you use, pattern. I could really see a pattern. And not only could I see a pattern, there was like a system. And so a colleague of mine, Dr. Louise Timmer, said, yeah, kind of like stages. I go, yeah, that's it. They went through. So I created 6 stages of Metahab. The first stage is the acute phase, and that's what just happened? What am I going through? What do I need to do today? That's what I tell people, and they go, well, am I go, don't even go there. Don't even go there. We don't want to go too far in the future. We need to get you from day to day to day, and that takes a while, and start realizing that's when, the world flipped for you, and you have to go through that process. Stage 2, and hopefully all your listeners can identify with this because they've either been through it or they've had a family member who has been through something, and they call it the turning point. The critical decision to say, I hate what's going on. I didn't choose what's going on. I don't like what's going on, but I'm going to make the choice to move forward. I'm not even sure how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do that. And once they make that decision to move forward, they go to stage 3, which I call, therapies. So it's complementary and traditional therapies. So a lot of family members, a lot of friends and everything can help you, identify certain things that you can do depending on whatever your challenge, adversity, or trauma was about. Different types of therapies, different types of counseling, different types, whatever you want to do to start moving forward and focusing on what you can do. And then that's a very, very, very busy time. Each is stage 4, which is adaptation and acceptance. Now, you adapt and accept, not forever, but for right now. That's a time where you just kind of like, kind of sit and chill. What happened? Where am I at? What's the beginning of the meaning for this? Where do I want to go? How do I see things now? Where do I go? And then stage 5 is like kind of a reentry stage. Okay, reintegration. You got to do something.
Yeah.
It may not be the same thing you did before. It may be something completely different, but you have to move into some purposeful activity. And very interestingly, I cannot tell you how many people have said to me over and over again, people, this does not happen overnight. This happens over time. But the door that they had gone through or were involved in closed.
Right.
But all of a sudden, through their looking, this other new, very interesting opportunity and door opened up. And had that door not been shut, they would never have looked in that direction. And stage 6 is metahab or metahabilitation, and I call that taking on the future. That's when you clearly understood this mechanism, this process of moving through these stages and taking life on, engaging purposefully, engaging beautifully with all your systems to say, now I see things I didn't see before. Yes. Now I see life. And once you get there, you just are never going to see things the same. And so when you go through different things, that's when I tell students, so what if I go back to, maybe go back to the stages. Go back to the stages. Rework your stages. Rework the stages.
What was stage 4 again?
Stage 4 is adaptation and acceptance.
So when I was reviewing the stages, when I was making my notes, and I was thinking about my own story, that stage, and I thought about other people too, that seems to be where a lot of people, I could be wrong, but where people get stuck, because it's kind of where you take a beat and you're like, okay, here's where I'm at, so I'm doing. And then it's like to move into making that, the next is is it awareness?
Reintegration.
Reintegration. To make that leap into reintegration, which for me would have been my fitness competition that I did in 2017, which was literally 10 years in... it's kind of fuzzy because I kind of went in and out of stages like you talk about. But I was in that stage 4 for a long time before I actually finally made the decision to reintegrate. Do you see that where people will stick in a stage for a while, until they realize that they actually do have an option to move?
Well, I think you probably moved and you didn't. See, this is why I love working with people, because I just hear their story and I will go through the stages with them and I'll say, did you really stay in stage 4 that long? I kind of see this activity and this activity as seeing that you were, moving on. And that's the thing. That's the interaction I have with people. Again, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, but I will listen to their stories and I can help them understand their staging and what they did and say, I heard you say this. People who did that really did start to master stage 4 and move on to the next. And again, I think that, I don't really know people, people go, what's a timeline for this?
I was going to ask
that too. It's so, unusual to say what a timeline is for this. But becoming aware of the healing process also is something you've become aware of your part in it.
Yeah.
And so when you go, well, maybe maybe I need a little help to move here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I need a little different thing to move from here. And so it's always, well, what do you think that is? And what have you done in the past? And because, again, people, you've all metahabilitated. You've all done it. You've done it. You're here, you've done it. It's just understanding, breaking down that process so that it can strategically fit into your role and what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's the beauty of it. And there also, when I shared with you, I understood, I could see characteristics of what I called the metahabilitated survivors, as well as conditions or facilitating conditions. And before we even get into the stages, I have them look at characteristics, and I have them look at facilitating conditions, and I say, check off what you see you have, because we want to work with those. And it's so funny, I worked for 3 years with Salvation Army in their adult rehab center. And I remember the guys I'd work with, and they'd say, well, should I check off what I don't have? I go, no. I don't want to spend time with what you don't have. Right. I want to know what you have. And once you kind of start to identify those strengths, then we get into the staging. And the thing that is so fascinating to me too is once people do that and get into their staging, they go back to characteristics and facilitating conditions and start checking more things off. And I said, see? This is just making you aware of what you have. The more you process this, you become more aware. Well, really, I am more resilient than I thought. I really did ask for there's just all these things. And so to me, the beauty of it, the absolute beauty of it, and I shared this with you. My son Keenan does film in New York, and we have these wonderful discussions around this. And I remember when I first came out with the whole metahab concept and the process. And I said to him, Keenan, though, this is really pretty simple. And he goes, Mom, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's not worthy. Yeah. It just means you got to the essence of it. And as I tell people, there's lots of ways to make chocolate chip cookies. This isn't the only way to achieve the domains of post-traumatic growth. This is one way that I came upon that people from any type of situation, from challenges or whatever, I work a lot with vicarious and secondary trauma. So clinicians, first responders, firefighters, counselors, people who work with the people.
Yeah, you were saying like the Boston marathon bombing, 9/11, Oklahoma, like you named off, I remember one of your interviews, that's considered like a second or a vicarious?
So they'll go through, when you look at secondary and vicarious trauma, some people lump them together. One's more like like a motor vehicle accident happened once. The vicarious has more to do with where you are sustained into a sustained trauma experience. And not only my research, but other people I looked at prior to going into my own research on secondary and vicarious trauma definitely show people who work with people who are in those jobs absolutely can experience post-traumatic growth as a direct result of the work they do. But they must take on the mindset and the practice in advance so that they can experience that. Communities, you see that when I did some postdoc work and I looked at communities, Oklahoma City, like I said, I was on a committee for 9/11. I was introduced to the director, Dave McGilvery, the Boston Marathon, and after the bombings, and I met with him the summer after the bombing and then the next summer, and you could see the process that even the Boston community went through with that.
What are some of the characteristics when you say there's these patterns with these characteristics that they all seem to have in common? What are some of these characteristics?
Well, I'll just go over some brief
Yeah, yeah.
things, and I can, direct you toward,
Yes.
because this
it's
is
more
all
my
that there's.
curiosity.
Yeah. So it's things like, people, are resilient. They don't stay in the negative. They
Okay.
don't surround themselves with negative people. They express some gratitude. They look into they challenge themselves to look into the future. They, I'm trying to think just off the top of my head. There's a whole list of them.
Resiliency seems
but
to be a big one, though.
Huge. People, and you know what? I get a little frustrated because people love to throw that word around, but it's a really important word. And I think it's that's why I take time with my students on defining that word and saying, how have you seen this work in your life? Because it's an action. It's an action word, and we are resilient because of the stresses on us.
Yeah.
So there are things like I talk in my class. There's, people go, for example, you might say, well, how are you doing? Oh, I'm stressed. Well, okay. What I break it down with, we have stressors. We have stressors. And some of those we choose and some of those are chosen for us. So a stressor may be going to college. You choose that. That's a stressor. And the result of that stressor is some stress. But that stress challenges you to push against your systems, to engage meaningfully with those systems, to grow. There are other stressors we might not pick, like the stressor you went through, the stressor I went through. But those stressors stressed our systems, and our response to that stress over time, engaging with those systems, made those systems more resilient and stronger. So when we get pushed up against again, we go, yeah, like the immune
100%.
system.
Yes.
A stressor is the common cold. Can't do you get the cold, got to go through, like this is a good example. You got to go through certain things with the common cold, but you engage meaningfully with that. You get some extra rest, you get some fluid, you might take vitamin D, you might take vitamin C, whenever you purposefully engage with that stressor that has stressed your immune system. But your immune system takes that on and says, what's this? Okay, I'm going to fall apart a little bit, but you're going to help me get together, and I'm going to help you get together. And guess what? When I see that virus again, I'm on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it begs the question. I was just thinking about, because I was in the last few years, I've shifted my thinking on a lot of things on this subject, and it makes me wonder what's more harmful. Because you hear people talk about, stress is a killer, which obviously there's a case to be made for extreme stress and the damage that can do.
Yes.
But also when I look at like what's more harmful, like stress and adversity or complacency and comfort, and then it makes me think about raising kids. My whole life I've been pretty much a stay-at-home mom. Well, not my whole, the last 22 years. Well, no, I mean, he moved out before then, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it's just so funny how we go to such great lengths to protect our kids from adversity because it's our, instinct to protect. And it's the very thing that actually makes them thrive and strong. So then what ends up happening is if you do have a healthy, happy, well-functioning home where there's not stress built in via dealing with domestic violence issues and abuse and addictions that your kid is having, then you have to, I guess, put them in sports and things that are going to, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's so funny. One of the things I absolutely love about being a researcher is you go in with a research question, you're looking at one thing, and then other things bubble up. And when I did my doctoral research, because I did talk to people about how they grew up, I really kind of understood one of the things that came out of my research, and I tell this to people all the time. If I had every parent of a 2-year-old in front of me, I would beg them, don't make that child's life perfect. You are going to hobble them. They will never understand their greatness if you do not allow them to struggle. And so when we get in there, and believe me, as a mother of 3, you don't want your children to be hurt or suffer. But if you stay away from, so let's look at this. If you stay away from not allowing them to go through some challenges and adversities, it's kind of like you look at, you won't let them understand how they can engage purposefully and become resilient. It's kind of like resiliency gym, right? So please, parents, I'm going to say this to you. Do not go to every teacher that did not love your kid. Do not go to every teacher that did not give your child an A, or every coach that kicked your child off a team and all that kind of stuff. That is tough stuff to go through. I have been through all of that with our children. And I recognized my role was to not fix it, but to have them develop their personality and their mindset around that. Because it's going to happen. It's, sometimes, again, you mentioned domestic violence. I mean, I understand there are multiple major traumas that go through that. And that, again, special attention needs to be paid to those situations, because those children and those people, it's more of that chronic, toxic stress. So we need to pay attention. But there are other stressors that bring stress that aren't going to, diminish your systems, but things to learn and grow from. And I also, I would say to my children, they'd come to me with some things, and I would just say, wow, that's a lot. What do you want to do about that? Not what, tell me, here's what I would say, what do you want to do about that? Even with my students, they come to me with problems. I go, here's the deal. I'm way too busy. I'm not smart enough to fix all your problems. You come to me with 3 options. Let's discuss those options and see what's best. And things like that I just think children are like go to a playground. Like, gosh, we just get our kids in so many structured things. And when free play is what they need, go to a playground and you'll see how all these kids are there. For the most part, they're all going to start to figure out how to engage with each other, how they're going to figure out how to climb up this, or they fell off a swing, or they did that, and they come together, and, they can figure stuff out. So with the question of what if you have a situation, and I think you're undermining your own situation because look what you went through. And people had to figure out how to support you and live their life. Your husband, your children. So it wasn't like everything. Are there situations where families work very diligently to pull things together, and maybe you're not having that level of trauma, but let's talk about adversity or challenges? There is not one family that has not at least dealt with adversities and challenges. How are you going to do that? How are you showing your... And the number one thing, I said this during COVID. I did a podcast during COVID, and I go, I'm going to challenge. The number one thing is you parents better figure that out, because your children are watching. They don't listen to what you say. They watch what you do. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you taking care of your spiritual needs? Are you taking care of are you doing all those things? Because they are watching you.
Yeah.
So, when you really kind of get a deep dive, these conversations are really interesting and fun versus, again, what can we do? What have we, sharing family stories, all those kinds of things about people who have been through it. We do all this 23andMe and all this kind of stuff. Why? maybe you should use that to say, hey, look what Grandma went through. Look what Uncle Joe went through.
Yep.
Look at what, and I just like embracing that part of us.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's interesting how kids, as they get older, and I did this with my mom too, look back on the experience of their parents and go, oh, wow, I knew, but I didn't, then they start to get it. And it is pretty interesting, and it kind of can inform our own thinking and how we approach our own issues that, very fascinating.
One of the things I do in my class, one of the final things is they have to, I love Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. And so so we watch a film on that. We talk about that. And I said, you got to do a hero's journey. And I want you to do that. You're going to write your own hero's journey because that's the finish of the class. But I also want you to pick out somebody that you know.
Yeah.
Family, friend, somebody. And I love reading those papers because these students have, meaningfully engaged with a mom, a dad, a grandma, an uncle,
so good.
a friend of theirs or somebody, and they see how they have, they see the facilitating conditions, they see the characteristics, they see the stages played out in front of them. And I said, see, there's a mechanism here. Yeah. And I cannot tell you how they just said, my mom was so excited when I talked about this, or I never knew, like you said, I never understood this about my parents. That's where we want to go, people. That's where we want to go.
And it's becoming rarer and rarer, which is, heartbreaking because it's important. This has been so great. But as we start to wrap up, I want to give you the floor and have you talk about. So Dr. Joyce has something coming up called, I guess it's called Women's Wellness Day.
Yeah.
You plan for September 7th in Sonoma.
Pick this up.
Okay, she's going to pull it up.
I want to make sure I get it all right. Okay.
Yeah.
So I would just say, thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, I may direct you exactly to a place you can get a hold with me and a hold of the work I do, which is I do a lot of speaking. I love consulting with organizations, people in organizations. So again, a lot of organizations might come to me and want to have all this wellness, resiliency, growth programming. And I always say, you probably already have that. So let's consult and let me pick out the things you already have and we can work on that. Or again, I do a lot of programs. So I certify people in the use of metahab. So please, if you need to get in touch with me about that, drjmf. So Dr. Joyce Mikal-Flynn, drjmf.com is my website. Love to talk to you about that. I do constantly reach out and have events that I do. One of the ones coming up is called Women's Wellness Day. I love using nature as a healing backdrop. So on Saturday, September 7th, I will have a day in Sonoma where we have, and I only have room at this point for 12 women. They come to Sonoma, and the thing is, no PowerPoints, no lectures. We come together and we introduce each other as we come to this place in Sonoma, introduce each other. We go through concepts around healing, health, wellness, mindfulness, those types of things. Then we do a very low intensity, but we do get outside and do a lovely hike in the hills of Sonoma. Come back, we have a silent lunch, and then we have a lovely debrief after that and finish up the day. So that is on September the 7th. And again, you can go to drjmf.com and sign up from there, or get in touch with our lovely podcast host and she can tell you about this.
I'm going to have links for that in the show notes, whether you're listening on an audio platform or watching on YouTube. Just check the show notes. I'll have links for everything. I'm also going to leave links for both of her books, Turning Tragedy into Triumph and Anatomy of a Survivor. Dr. Joyce was mentioning when I was looking through your website, there's a lot there. There's
Yeah.
so much there, and you have a lot of products you've developed too. And I didn't go to do much of a deep dive into the consulting, but I saw the consultations. Do you do one-on-ones, or is this more for like companies?
This
Okay.
is more like, I don't, like I said, I'm not a therapist, so I don't do one-on-one, but if you need to get in touch with me, I can help direct you
Okay.
because we do certify therapists to do that. And so they may use as part of their therapeutic program, they may use some of the concepts around that. But again, I try and make this easy. So like you said, if you go on my website, not only have the 2 books, but I have workbooks for survivors. I have workbooks for family and friends. I have workbooks for clinicians. I have, things like that you can go in and, get and mess with and play around with, and we can work on that. But I've done certification things for nurses, clinicians, first responders, ambulance companies, addiction dependency organizations. So I work with a lot of different organizations, and it's not only an honor but a pleasure to do that. And I love helping them figure out how to utilize the system into their existing programming. It's so fun. It really is fun.
So cool. So purposeful. I love it. This has been so great. I hope you guys enjoy. Was there anything else we missed before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it. I just like to have people get a hold of me and see if I can, you can help. If I can have ways to help you, and if you know people and organizations that you think I could be a part of, you can help me, because this is really this work. I love this work. This is one of the things that, I'm always looking, have I done enough? Have I done enough? I want to do more. So I love working with people on this, and it's really, it feeds me. So I hope I can help feed you and your organization.
That's how you know you're doing the right thing, because it's a gift to us, and you're giving, and it's a gift to you. So thank you, guys. Thank you, Dr. Joyce, for being here. Thank you guys so much for listening. Check the show notes for all the links that we've spoken about today, and we will see you back next week. Bye. Thanks so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this conversation, please give it a like and leave me a comment. I want to know what you guys think. Also, if you're looking for more information about how to be a guest on the show, please go to our website at humanityunlockedpodcast.com. We only record shows in person, and we are located in Sacramento, California. Oh, and if you're not subscribed, make sure you tap that button so you can get updated on weekly episodes as they go live. Is that it? I think that's it. See you guys next time.